Tammy was very involved in sports and in all of her activities. She was on the newspaper and also did the yearbook. Just about everything that you could be involved in, she wanted to be involved in. Tammy enjoyed life. She graduated on the National Honor Society with scholarships and was looking forward to college. Tammy was on her way home from work and she was on a cell phone.
She was coming home from work and got a phone call and was stopped at a stop sign.
Today, throughout the nation, we face an ever-increasing threat to our safety. But this threat comes from within, because this threat is of our own making. You see, every day, crashes like this happen across the country with disturbing frequency. In a split second, lives can be changed forever. The human and economic toll from vehicle crashes is staggering. So we have to ask this question: why are these accidents happening? In many cases, we know that the cause is some kind of driver error or mechanical failure. But what's becoming more apparent is that an alarming number of vehicle crashes involve drivers that were simply distracted. You may have noticed that we're experiencing an explosion of driving distractions, partly because there are so many things to distract us, both inside and outside our vehicles. But perhaps most dangerous is the widespread attitude that it's okay to perform a variety of other activities while we're driving. This attitude seems so commonplace that most of us aren't aware how often we're distracted from the most important task at hand: driving the vehicle safely. Consequently, we're paying a high price for driving while distracted. In fact, the frequency of distracted driving crashes and their economic toll in the U.S. is shocking. Consider these sobering figures. It's estimated that up to half of all vehicle crashes involve distracted drivers. About 284,000 distracted drivers are involved in serious crashes each year. Driver distraction is a factor in nearly 8,000 crashes a day, or about 6 crashes per minute. The economic toll of distracted driving crashes is estimated at as high as $80 billion per year. Some of the most common driving distractions seem almost harmless, like looking at things outside the vehicle, adjusting the audio controls, interacting with other occupants in the vehicle, reaching for objects in the vehicle, and also eating and drinking. A recent study collected some interesting descriptive data on various driving distractions. For example, it took a group of cell phone users an average of 13 seconds to dial a cell phone, 8 seconds to answer a ringing phone, and each conversation averaged about 1.5 minutes. It also took 4 seconds, on average, to light a cigarette, and 5 to 6 seconds to change the radio station or insert a CD or a tape. Drivers manipulated their audio systems about 8 times per hour of driving. Were these drivers paying full attention to the road ahead while engaged in these activities? Would you feel safer if you or a member of your family or an employee were a passenger in their vehicles? Lots of distractions last only a few seconds, but even a few seconds can make a huge difference when we're driving. For instance, at the relatively slow speed of 30 miles per hour, if we're distracted for 2 seconds, we'll travel 88 feet. That's about the length of 6 mid-sized vehicles. lot can happen in 88 feet if we're not focused on our driving. Now, let's say we're cruising along at 65 miles an hour. We're having a heated discussion with a passenger, and we turn to them for a scant 2 seconds to make a point. 2 seconds isn't much time, but at 65 miles per hour, we've just traveled 190 feet, 2/3 the length of a football field, without any idea what's happening on the road. When we're distracted, it's also common for the vehicle to start drifting off the road or into another lane of traffic, creating a very hazardous situation. And when we're distracted, we also lose valuable reaction time that we need in order to avoid hazards. The results can be tragic. These distractions may seem harmless, but they can be dangerous because they take our eyes and our concentration off the road. If we're driving while talking on a cell phone or lost in thought, our eyes may be on the road, but we can still be dangerously distracted because our minds aren't thinking about driving. The use of a cell phone while driving presents a particularly onerous threat to our safety. A recent report asserts that a driver who is distracted by a cell phone is just as dangerous as a drunk driver behind the wheel. Today, there are more than 170 million cell phones in service across the country. The temptation to use our cell phones is ever present and growing. For example, we may opt to use cell phones in congested traffic, where traffic tends to move more slowly, but where the risk of a crash with another vehicle is significantly greater. In fact, recent research shows that drivers were 4 times more likely to have a collision when using a cell phone. And distractions can become even more hazardous when we experience more than one at a time, when road and weather conditions are poor, or when we're drowsy or under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Cell phone use in driving is a problem at any point in time. You combine that with alcohol use, and it's a recipe for disaster.
There's no question that distracted driving is both dangerous and widespread. In fact, we often do things while driving that we don't even consider distracting. If we take a few simple steps to eliminate our distractions, many crashes can be prevented. For instance, we can control and eliminate distractions by reviewing information and having our coffee before we take to the road. And we can choose to make phone calls or find our favorite radio station when we aren't driving. We must recognize that many driving distractions are simply caused by our own actions. So the best way to prevent this kind of distraction is to simply avoid these actions while driving. We need to remember that distractions really are dangerous. At the time, we don't think our activities are dangerous, but a crash will prove us wrong. There are other distractions we can't control, like things happening outside our vehicle or passengers trying to get our attention. Although we can't control these distractions, we can choose to ignore them and stay focused on our driving. If distractions inside the vehicle can't be ignored, like a screaming child or dangerous insect, we should find a safe place to pull off the highway and away from traffic so we can deal with the problem. If we're going to drive an unfamiliar vehicle, we should first get to know the location and operation of the controls so they don't become distractions. We should then make adjustments before we drive away so we're comfortable and have a clear view. Driving in unfamiliar settings is another situation where it's important to avoid distractions. If we need to use a map, review it before starting out, or when we can pull safely off the road. If we have a passenger, let them do the navigating. These are some simple procedures that we as drivers should responsibly follow. For over 35 years, attorney Gary Hogue has had extensive trial experience on issues relating to personal injury and auto insurance liability.
Automobile accidents can happen to anyone. It's just that momentary mistake that we may make. However, where we cause the accident by taking an affirmative step, such as calling on cell phone, doing some other activity which we know we shouldn't be doing while we're driving, a jury is going to be much more hard on that type of driver.
Families and communities can be forever changed by a brief moment of inattentiveness behind the wheel.
What I've learned from 36 years of trial experience is that you don't want to be there. I hope we never meet in court. The consequences of an automobile accident are not pleasant. They involve personal injury and death, pain and suffering to the victims, emotional distress to the driver who realizes that they are responsible for these devastating consequences to the victims. In addition, there are monetary consequences.
As a vehicle owner and operator, what price are you and your family prepared to pay for being distracted while driving?
I had my car accident and it tremendously set my life back horribly. I mean, I went from an all-out all-star to a person in a coma in just the blink of an eye.
There's not a day that goes by that we don't think about Tammy and what could have been.